You have asked me to address the question of the way the world is and how it can change, and what we as Baha'is call a new world order. So the topic is toward a new world order. As you know, all religions believe that the present day situation should change, and eventually good should overcome evil. And that in that process, we read in the Bible that a time will come when the lamb and lion will roam in the same pasture, and that Christians particularly are waiting for the time that there'll be peace on earth as it is in heaven. The same concept, the same mindset, we also see that in other religions, that in one way or another the time will come when there'll be peace on earth as it is in heaven. So, but even so, the concept, the idea of world order and world government has received a bad rap, particularly in the past few years. After World War II, there was a movement toward a new federalism and new federation and new world order, and perhaps a new world government. But then eventually there were a lot of people who became against it, and the movement against the world order and the world government seems to be at the present time more powerful perhaps than the people who are working toward a new world order. But I think people who have turned against this movement have misunderstood it. They have thought, or they're thinking, that this new world order, this new government that people are promoting it, are hoping for, would be a dictatorial system, and they would lose all the liberties that they have worked so hard to get. But this by no means is the intention of the people who are thinking in that direction, particularly Baha'is. When Baha'is talk about a new world order, they are thinking of a new way of dealing with the problems of the world, and how to make the world more peaceful and in a way even more democratic and more representative of the ideals of people. What can we do in order to reduce the danger of war, and eventually to even eliminate the danger of war and conflict across the globe? In the Baha'i writings there are references to what is called the lesser peace, the greater peace, and the most great peace. The original words for these were Sulh Asghar, Sulh Akbar, and Sulh Azam. In these segments we will focus more on the lesser peace, and then the prerequisites for having some kind of representative world government to deal with conflicts of all kinds that we see in the world. I'll share with you in these segments some of the passages from the writings of Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith, and those who came after him, and at the present time some of the mandates and letters issued by the Universal House of Justice, the authoritative body that represents the Baha'i world. As we all know, and I'd like to elaborate on this a little bit, there are two forces in the world that are working simultaneously. The constructive power and the destructive power. So these two powers are working in the opposite direction. And that all people of goodwill hope and believe that the good would overcome that destructive force eventually, no matter how long it may take. Among the forces of destruction, of course, one of the worst forms of destruction is war and antagonism of one group versus another. One tribe fighting with another tribe within the country, or the gangs within different cities fighting one another, or fighting just the law-abiding citizens. And then, of course, war among nations. This is nothing new. From hundreds or thousands of years ago, people have been fighting. We have been the Spartans in Greece, and we have had the Romans and the Egyptian Empire and elsewhere, who were trying to monopolize power and destroy all the opponents, all those who were who they thought could be a threat at one time or another. One of the most destructive forces that particularly the people in the Middle East and Eastern Europe never forget was the invasion of Mongols and the Mongol hordes, and particularly Genghis Khan, who destroyed so many cities and killed so many people in order to dominate that whole region. And at one point, perhaps about 700 years ago, most of Asia and up through Eastern Europe was under the domination of the Mongols, through a tremendous amount of destruction. And then, of course, we all know about the almost 200 years of crusades, and also the hundreds of years of Inquisition and basically destructive force, destructive element in the Christian church that left Europe for hundreds of years in dark ages, and led to hundreds of years of what was called Inquisition, where thousands of people, because they thought differently than the church, were put to death in all cities, many cities across Europe. And then, of course, by 16th century, we had some of the most destructive force, again in the Christian world in Europe, where now we had the Luther movement, the Protestant movement, and then the various groups, the Protestants and Catholics, started destroying and killing each other, one another. And it led to what is called the 30-Year War in 16th century, where some 1/3 of Europe were slaughtered by Christians from different denominations. All of that continued, this destructive force, until we reached 20th century. And of course, before 20th century, we also had some major wars between the Ottoman Empire and the French and British, who were colonizing and invading other regions of the globe in order to have more possessions. And also Russians, and then Japanese. So we had all kinds of conflicts and huge wars and destruction all across the globe. A lot of them initiated in Europe. Until we reached 20th century, and of course we had the most horrific wars in 20th century, including World War I and World War II, and the rise of communism and the rise of fascism and Nazism, and we're all familiar with that part of history and what happened. All this together left, perhaps, according to some statistics, over 100 million people dead and tens, if not hundreds of cities and villages destroyed, totally destroyed by these destructive forces. And then finally, at the end of World War II, supposedly in order to end the war, we had the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, where hundreds of thousands of innocent people were burned to death by that horrific atomic bomb. Well, we hope that these destructive forces are over, but as we all know, soon after the end of World War II, we had the Korean conflict, and then we had Vietnam. And then after that, going to Africa, we had several conflicts in Africa, including, the horrific system under the president there, Idi Amin, in Uganda, and then Zaire, and then the horrific slaughter of close to 1 million people in Rwanda, and the genocide in Sudan, which still continues. And then the conflicts in the Middle East, including the invasion of Kuwait by Iraq by Saddam Hussein at the time. And then beyond, and coinciding with that, or a few years before that, the 8-9 years conflict between Iraq and Iran, where millions of people were killed and scores of cities destroyed in that conflict. And of course, these conflicts continue even today. We have the conflict in Iraq, we have the conflict in Afghanistan, and prior to that, the destruction and the genocide in Cambodia, and in China, the atrocities in North Vietnam, and all of that. Many of them continue even until the present day. So much for this destructive force. But then, alongside with this destructive force has been this constructive force. In the East, where people who were fed up with all these kind of conflicts started reflecting, and many people started thinking about poetry and the good nature of man. And in the Persian language we have the great poets such as Sana'i and Khayyam and Rumi and Sa'di and Hafez and so many others who were leading humanity to a peaceful way of thinking and peaceful way of living on this planet Earth. And then in the West, starting with 15th century, we had the event of Renaissance, where there was so much progress in literature and in arts of all kinds, particularly beginning in today's Italy and leading to other regions of Europe. And beyond Renaissance, then we had the Age of Reformation with the coming of Luther and beginning of emancipation of mind, even in terms of religion, so that people can read the Bible for themselves and decide for themselves as to how they want to believe and what they want to believe. And then beyond that, of course, we have the age of scientific revolution, where so many inventions began to appear particularly in Western Europe and in other parts of the globe. And so each one of these is a subject of intensive research and many talks. And of course, after the scientific revolution, we had the age of 18th century is known as the Age of Enlightenment in Europe, where we had the greats such as Voltaire, who helped humanity to think better and to decide better and to be able to reflect on the most critical issues of our time. which all led to this idea of separation of church from state, and to many other freedoms that we enjoy today. And then beyond that, coming to end of 18th century and 19th century, we had the Industrial Revolution, and then we had the advent of communication, beginning with telegraph and telephone and radio and television, and then now computers and all of that. And then in 20th century, of course, the advent of computers and information age, so that the whole globe can communicate with one another. So these are all the positive forces. So the negative and positive forces then were working together. And our hope is that the positive force will dominate the negative, and the peace and tranquility, which has been the hope of all manifestations of God, will eventually come to pass on this planet. The beginning of security agreements in Europe goes back to the year 1648. And it was in that year where an agreement was reached. I believe it is called Westphalia Agreement, where after a series of wars, I think this was shortly after the 30-year bloody war of Europe, that some nations of Europe got together and said that maybe we can resolve our conflicts through negotiations and through discussion rather than war. And so they could apparently accomplish a few things, but not many, because we know that all kinds of wars and conflicts continued after this so-called resolution, or resolve, or agreement, until we reach the year 1899, where again, after a number of conflicts, some people of goodwill recommended to have a peace conference in Hague, which is known as the First Hague Peace Conference of 1899. And again, it was meant to reduce armaments, to have some control on armaments, and to see if some agreements can be reached that nations can discuss issues with one another where there's not agreement. And I should also mention that beyond the year 1648 is when we see that there are ambassadors and there are consuls and consulates in different countries. That was started with the idea that in order to be able to come up with an understanding in trade, in security and all of that, it is better to have a representative in another country, and they can have a representative in our country, and we can discuss the issues. So then, after the Peace Conference of 1899, there was another conference also in Hague in 1907, also for the purpose of establishing an enduring peace among nations, particularly among the European nations. And as we all know, that also fell apart in 1914 when we had the First World War. So after the First World War in 1918 and 1919, with the initiative of President Wilson of US, there was a series of conferences in Europe, and that was the beginning of League of Nations, which was also seated in Hague for the purpose of establishing a permanent peace and security in the world. And President Wilson suggested a 14-point document in which he outlined the elements needed in reducing armaments, for having control on all kinds of arms and ammunitions and its distribution across the globe, and the means and ways of negotiation in order to avoid armed conflict across the globe. Unfortunately, the US government, the Senate, did not ratify this agreement. So US did not become part of that League of Nations. Did not become a member of the League of Nations. And at the same time, two other parties to this league, which could have been Russia and Germany, also refused to become members. And as we see, this was also short-lived. This hope for world peace and tranquility was short-lived, and it led to the Second World War, that other major conflict. And that most destructive force continued for the next 5 or 6 years, from end of 1939 to the end of 1945. And after bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan, which led to slaughter of hundreds of thousands of innocent people, then that war was ended. And then this is the time when, through the negotiations of Britain and US, they led the force for establishing the United Nations. And they first met in April of 1945 in San Francisco and chose their permanent seat in New York, and shortly then after they started operating. Again, with the hope of reducing armaments, for having all governments of the world to become members of this, to sign an agreement, and with the hope of again reducing armaments and for reducing the possibility of future armed conflict across the globe. Well, the UN has had some successes and many failures as well. They have not been able to stop wars and conflicts altogether. They have been able to have some negotiated agreements in other parts and in some other parts of the globe. And unfortunately, the problems continue, and the problems of conflict has not yet been resolved. Obviously, there are some major problems with the current setup of the United Nations. The major ones of which being that funding of UN, which is done by member countries, is voluntary. It is not obligatory. And many nations fall behind, and if they have some disagreement with UN, they just don't pay it. So therefore, UN's operation is at the whims of the nations who are supposedly members. There's a lot of politics. These member nations are not there with one heart and one mind and with one hope of real peace and tranquility and security. They all have all these kind of conflicting ideas and conflicting opinions. And then on top of that, the UN does not have the power of taxation. And because of this, they don't have any kind of police force that can carry out the mandates of the United Nations. But then coinciding with the United Nations, many non-government agencies, many philanthropist groups, including the Baha'is, joined the United Nations as non-government organizations. And they are doing what they can in terms of human rights, in terms of women's rights, in terms of racial equity, in terms of industrial and economic equity across the globe. They are having prepared a number of resolutions, and they're trying to see how much of it can be carried out in terms of environment and ecology and many other global issues of our time. Many of these organizations are also hard at work. In the prior segment, I shared with you some of the positive and negative forces in the world which help or retard the establishment of a new world order. And basically bringing together peace and harmony in the world. In this segment, I want to share with you what the Baha'i world is doing initially within the Baha'i community, within the Baha'i world. And it is my understanding that this, what Baha'is are doing, can serve as a model so that the different groups, active groups, universities, governments, scientists, thinkers, can look at this model, at this operating model, and see if this could be a good model for changing the world, for solving some of the problems of the world. So therefore, I'm going to share with you what we call the Baha'i administrative world order within the Baha'i community. Basically, in every city where there are 9 or more Baha'is, on an annual basis, there is a system of election. And the Baha'i election system has some very unique features. First, Baha'i election is secret, which means even a husband and wife do not know who the person wants to vote for. The other element about Baha'i voting is that there is no candidacy. I can vote for anybody that I want. And the prerequisites, the conditions for who I can vote for is basically spelled out by the founder of the Baha'i faith. That the person should be honest and should be humble and should be one who wants to serve society, who wants to be a servant, not a boss, in effect. So I look for those kind of features for the person I want to vote for. So Baha'i voting then is secret, is no candidacy, and without any propaganda, which means I cannot stand up there and say that vote for me because I'm better than this other fellow, and don't vote for him because he's worse than I am. Opposite. A Baha'i should be humble, a Baha'i should not have a high profile in that sense, and should be one who wants to dedicate himself to the service of the humankind. And then society would vote for those kind of people to represent them. In addition to this, Baha'i voting is without any kind of propaganda of any kind. No advertising, no propaganda. And finally, in the Baha'i voting process, there is no partisanship. There is not this party and that party, and those parties fighting against one another in order to vanquish one and for the other one to win. It is a win-win situation. People who are chosen as representative of society should be the ones who serve society to the best of their abilities. So in every city where the number of Baha'is are more than 9, there is an annual election, and it's only for 1 year. 9 people are elected, and there is no question of the votes should be more than 50%, 60%, there's none of that. The 9 people who receive the highest number of votes, those 9 people would become representatives, or as we call the local spiritual assembly of the Baha'is of that city, who represent the affairs of the Baha'is, if it is a marriage or a death, problems, marital problems, any kind of problems that community could have, could go to that assembly. The second step would be that when there are a number of local assemblies within a country, then on an annual basis, we have an annual convention. In this convention, depending on how many local assemblies are in that area, and how many communities are in that area, a number of representatives are elected. The elected numbers could be 1 or 2 or 3. And then these people, who at this time for the United States, I think are around 175 or 180, they would gather in Chicago, where the center of the Baha'i community is in the US, in the vicinity of Chicago, in Wilmette, Illinois, once a year, these elected representatives. And they would in turn elect 9 people. It doesn't have to be among them. It would be 9 people in the United States. And then these 9 people would become the members of the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the country, and would represent the Baha'is of that country for the period of 1 year, both internal and external. For example, in defense of the faith, in publicity about the faith, in what we call propagation and teaching and protection of the Baha'i community. They would take any steps that they feel is necessary. Then, the members of the National Spiritual Assemblies of all the countries of the world, which at this time is close to 200 national assemblies in the entire world, in Africa, in Americas, in Europe, in Asia, and Australia. All of them gathered together in Haifa, Israel, where it is considered as the global center of the Baha'i faith. And they gather in that city and once every 5 years, and they again elect from all the Baha'is of the world 9 people who become the members of the Universal House of Justice. And they represent the Baha'is of the world for 5 years. As individuals, of course, we respect them as we respect any other Baha'i, but they don't have any power or any jurisdiction. When they get together as 9, then they represent the affairs of the Baha'i community at large. And we obey their instructions as Baha'is. We are totally obedient to the instructions and mandates of the Universal House of Justice. Among the other features of Baha'i election process and representation is the importance of consultation rather than conflict. It is always preferred for the decisions of the local assembly or national assembly to be unanimous, but we consult in a spirit of love and harmony, and then the majority vote always rules. So much better if it is unanimous. If I have an opinion and I'm a member of a local assembly, I should give this opinion as something to be consulted on. And we all, without prejudice of any kind, consult on that issue and make a decision. And then at that point it becomes the decision of the local assembly of that community. In addition to all of these things that I mentioned, the Universal House of Justice selects a number of individuals within the community of the Baha'is of the world, and they call them counselors. And these counselors are selected by the Universal House of Justice. They are sent all across the globe. They are selected for certain parts of the globe, and they are in charge of protection and propagation of the faith. They serve as consultants to these national spiritual assemblies, and we respect them individually and collectively, and they serve those communities. These counselors, in turn, would select assistants, whom we call auxiliary board members, who A number of them reside in different cities of the globe, and they help those communities in a consultative manner. There are so many unique features in the administrative order of the Baha'i Faith, but the result of this is that it is harmonious. In many ways it is unanimous. There is no conflict and contention, and the Baha'is of the world, from all countries of the world, have learned to live together in peace and harmony, and that this should be these should be the preliminary steps to bringing about the world peace and harmony that we hope for, and we are confident that we'll get there. In this segment, I want to share with you some of the solutions that Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i Faith, suggests for bringing together peace and harmony to the world, and in effect bringing a functioning world government to run the affairs of the global community. A couple of weeks ago, in the October 4th issue of Newsweek, I came across this article, The New World Order. And in this, the author suggests that tribal ties, race, ethnicity, and religion are becoming more important than borders, and then divides the world into some 18 or 19 communities where these ties of religion, ethnicity, and race have brought people together more than nationhood, and in effect suggests that we have a long way to go until we reach that point of harmony and unity, and we may never reach there. Then in this other article, in a magazine issued by Baha'is called The Baha'is, some years back, I came across a drawing. This drawing was done by a 10-year-old Baha'i, I believe from South America, who suggests that she shows the world, and that everybody is engaged from Africa and from Asia and from Europe and from America are engaged in cleaning up this world. This was apparently his understanding of how the future world would be like, as we all pitch in to help to bring order and peace and harmony to our planet. So in this segment, what I'd like to do is to share with you some of the writings of the founders of this faith with regard to this global peace and harmony, and before we discuss it. In a sense, all the teachings of the Baha'i faith would ultimately lead us to this final segment, which is bringing world order to this chaotic world that we are in at the present time. Among these teachings, you may know, is the importance of racial harmony, equality between the rights of men and women, the conflict resolution through peaceful means rather than fighting, reduction of armaments, and creation of a world order, global education all across the globe, and particularly moral education, so that people from childhood learn about the importance of living in peace and harmony, and so many other teachings, including the very first one, which is independent search for truth, so that all of us engage in finding the truth, searching for ourselves, and not be dependent on whoever tells us what the truth is and what the way of thinking should be. With this in mind, I'm going to share with you some of these passages. The first passage I want to share with you is from one of the writings of Baha'u'llah called Proclamation of Baha'u'llah. This is the collection of what he wrote to the kings and rulers of the world and to the people of the world. I'm just going to share with you a passage from what he wrote to the people of the world. He says, "The world's equilibrium hath been upset through the vibrating influence of this most great, this new world order. Mankind's ordered life hath been revolutionized through the agency of this unique, this wondrous system, the like of which mortal eyes have never witnessed." This is a great claim. Baha'u'llah says that what you see that the world is so upset in the past century or so is because now we have a new order. And mankind is going through this turmoil, transition, until we reach the total maturity and we can establish this ultimate peace and harmony that the world badly needs. I'll share with you a couple of other passages from another selection from the writings of Baha'u'llah. And these passages also deal with the question of how to bring peace and unity and harmony in the world. He says, "The all-knowing physician hath his finger on the pulse of mankind. He perceiveth the disease and prescribeth in his unerring wisdom the remedy. Every age has its own problem, and every soul its particular aspiration. The remedy the world needeth in its present day afflictions can never be the same as that which subsequent age may require. Be anxiously concerned with the needs of the age you live in, and center your deliberations on its exigencies and requirements. For those who believe that religion of God is static and what he said remains the same, everlastingly the same, Baha'u'llah says something which is different from that. Although we as Baha'is believe that the essentials of all religions are one, but Baha'u'llah teaches us that exigencies of time, the needs of time, changes from time to time. It is at this stage in maturity of human race that we need global unity, that we need total global trade and exchange and interaction, that we need this global compulsory education, that we need to implement the ideas of racial harmony and oneness of the humankind and equality between the rights of men and women. These are the exigencies of this time, and that's what Baha'u'llah is teaching us. In another passage it says, "That which God hath ordained as the sovereign remedy and mightiest instrument for the healing of the world is the union of all his people in one universal cause, one common faith. This can in no wise be achieved except through the power of a skilled and all-powerful and inspired physician. For my life, this is the truth, and all else not but error." Well, I have been telling you about some of the different things that different groups are doing to bring about peace and harmony, but ultimately Baha'u'llah says that the ultimate physician is God, and that God has the ultimate remedy, and he's the one who brings the ultimate remedy for us. And although there are lots of good ideas, but unless and until we read and study the whole prescription that Baha'u'llah teaches us and bring it to reality, these bits and pieces may help, but will not bring the ultimate total solution. That's why, I believe it was like 40 years ago, should have been 1970 or so, when all Christian denominations got together in Chicago and had a conference. And they were wanting to see how they can bring peace and harmony and unity within at least the Christian family. And from what I understand, the ultimate announcement from that conference was that until and Jesus comes back himself, our total peace and harmony among these various denominations is impossible. Well, Baha'u'llah claims to be that divine physician who has come again to bring the remedy to all the problems of the humankind. In another tablet, I choose this from this book, which is called Tablets of Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith. He actually has a very profound and detailed tablet. It's like 15 or 20 pages of this collection of tablets. And this is called Lohe Dunya, the tablet to the world. And in this series of tablets, he makes the suggestions as to how this change, this drastic change to bring peace and harmony can be brought about. In it he says, "Arise, O people, and by the power of God's might, resolve to gain the victory over your own selves, that haply the whole earth may be freed and sanctified from its servitude to the gods of its idle fancies, gods that have inflicted such loss upon and are responsible for the misery of the wretched worshippers. These idols form the obstacle that impedeth man in his efforts to advance in the path of perfection. We cherish the hope that the hands of divine power may lend its assistance to mankind and deliver it from its state of grievous abasement." So what are these gods? These gods have been the gods of racism, the gods of sexism, the gods of materialism, the unbridled capitalism, or search for money and power, unlimited fashion. The gods of racism, the gods of fanaticism, and the gods of communism and fascism and Nazism, which have brought nothing but despair and destruction to mankind. So Baha'u'llah says that we have to put aside these gods and bring to our mind the real God, which is the God of unity and peace and love and harmony. And with that in mind in our heart, then we can start implementing the real change which is necessary for the humankind. Again, another passage in the same tablet, Baha'u'llah says, "It is incumbent upon every man in this day to hold fast unto whatsoever will promote the interests and exalt the station of all nations and just governments." So it's not enough to say that I am working only for the interest of my country. In Baha'i vision, in Baha'u'llah's vision, our interests should become global. If our thoughts and our interest is limited to only myself, or to even my country, ultimately that is limiting. That is not totally liberating. We have to think of all the needs of all the human race across the globe. That is a change in total mindset which has to come to pass. Then he says, "Consort with the followers of all religions in a spirit of friendliness and fellowship. Whatsoever hath led the children of men to shun one another, and has caused dissension and divisions amongst you, hath to the revelation of these words been nullified and abolished. From the heaven of God's will, and for the purpose of ennobling the world of being and of elevating the minds and souls of men, hath been sent down that which is the most effective instrument for the education of the whole human race." We know that in all past religions, in all past forms of denominations, in all past forms of nationhood and ideologies, there have been sources of division. There are elements which may be interpreted today as racist, or as sexist, or as nationalist, or as preferring one group of people over other group of people, or in interpreting that one denomination has all the truth and everybody else goes to hell, and so on and so forth. Baha'u'llah says, if you look at my words, anything which was the cause of any kind of division and misunderstanding and the strife and animosity, I have taken it out of the sacred book. And what I'm leaving with you is anything which brings for you and your family and for your nation and for the whole world nothing but harmony and peace and tranquility. So this is the mindset that Baha'u'llah is asking us to have in order for everything else to work. Then he says in the same tablet, the tablet to the world, it is not for his, that's for human beings, to boast that he loveth his country, but it is his who loveth the world. So in effect, Baha'u'llah is changing our mindset from loving a state or only a nation or only a group or only a tribe or only a religious denomination to love the whole world. Our country is the whole world. In another passage it said this span of the earth is one country and mankind is citizens. So this is the kind of mindset that the Baha'i should have. I'm going to read for you a couple of other passages because this is a very important tablet in which he lays the foundation for this world unity and world oneness, and then ultimately that world universal system that can bring about peace and harmony to the world. He says, this wronged one, by that he means himself, hath forbidden the people of God to engage in contention or conflict, and hath exhorted them to righteous deeds and praiseworthy character. In this day, the hosts that can ensure the victory of the cause are those of goodly conduct and saintly character. Blessed are they who firmly adhere unto them. Woe betide such as turn away therefrom. So in effect he's saying that in order for this faith to grow, there is nothing more important than righteousness and good deeds, so that if we claim that we believe in these thoughts, our actions should also prove it. It's not only words. Then he says, O people of God, I admonish you to observe courtesy, for above all else it is the prince of virtues. Without courtesy, that means the beginning of contention, and then strife, and then one being better than the other, and then fighting, and all the rest of it. Well is it with him who is illumined with the light of courtesy, and is attired with the vesture of uprightness. Whoso is endued with courtesy hath indeed attained a sublime station. In another passage from the same tablet, the tablet of the world, Baha'u'llah is saying that, referring to the members of these assemblies that I referred to earlier, who function the affairs, who run the affairs of the Baha'is, is that it's incumbent upon the ministers of the House of Justice to promote the lesser peace. The lesser peace is the first step toward bringing world harmony, and I will discuss it further later, so that the people of the earth may be relieved from the burden of exorbitant expenditures. This matter is imperative and absolutely essential, inasmuch as hostilities and conflict lie at the root of affliction and calamity. Then he says, then in addition, languages must be reduced to one common language to be taught in all the schools of the world. So in effect, he is suggesting an auxiliary language, a second language, where all of us can speak that second language so that they can become more harmonious. Third, it behooveth man to adhere tenaciously unto that which will promote fellowship, kindliness, and unity. So in effect, he's suggesting our mindset to be a mindset that in any discussion, we should be searching for harmony rather than conflict and animosity. Fourth, everyone, whether man or woman, should hand over to a trusted person a portion of what he or she earneth through trade, agriculture, or other occupation for the training and education of children, to be spent for this purpose with the knowledge of the trustees of the House of Justice. So education, universal education, children's education, moral education are considered so important that there should be taxation so that nobody would be left idle without having the benefit of going to school. Then fifth, he says that special regard must be paid to agriculture. And he goes on explaining this, that agriculture is the foundation of everything we need in terms of food, and that it has to be promoted and protected if necessary. In a famous tablet from Abdu'l-Baha, this eldest son of Baha'u'llah and the official interpreter of the writings of Baha'u'llah, he has an important tablet which is called the 7 Candles. In that candle he lists what he calls the 7 elements for reaching that ultimate peace and tranquility and order in the world. He calls them the 7 tablets, and he lists them as these: unity in the political realm, unity of thought in world undertakings, unity in freedom, unity in religion, unity of nations, unity of races, and unity of language. 5 of the 7 candles are beyond any doubt preliminary steps toward the lesser peace, whereas the 4th and 6th, namely the unity of religions and of races, refers to forms of unity that can be achieved only when the spiritualization of the masses has taken place. Then he says the first candle, which is unity in the political realm, has suddenly been realized through the establishment of the United Nations. This is what the writer of this book further states with regard to this tablet. The third, being unity and freedom, is surely a clear hint of the approaching end of colonialization as it continued to exist during the first half of the century. The 5th, namely unity of nations, represent the spirit of world consciousness expressed in the recognition that we are all, in the words of Abdu'l-Baha, citizens of one common fatherland. A consciousness which was fully realized during the 20th century. The significance of the remaining 2 candles, the 2nd and the 7th, namely unity of thought in world undertakings and unity of language, are obvious and need no elaboration. So let me just explain the best I can that these were some thoughts that Abdu'l-Baha believes are prerequisites to reaching that world unity and harmony, which is so badly needed in the world. Many of these aspirations with regard to equality between the rights of men and women, Declaration of the Human Rights, the nations coming together for dialogue, as we see in the United Nations, although imperfect, and working toward unity of language, which means having a language where everyone in the world can understand. Many of these things are being achieved, and although this is not there's not a definite end point, but we have achieved a number of these aspirations even now. And these are what Abdu'l-Baha calls as the requisites for the lesser peace. Perhaps what is referred to in the Baha'i writings as the greater peace is that point in between, which requires what he calls unity in thought, in world undertakings, and unity of language. And in many respects, we go to unity of language. It's probably we are getting there. When all people of the world agree to one language to be the auxiliary language, and unity in thought and undertaking, we are reaching more and more consensus, such as on issues of environment, on issues of ecology, on many issues dealing with security, many issues dealing with world order, and many issues dealing with world trade. So a lot of things are being achieved, and we are getting there. So these seem to be the ones that are either achieved or are being achieved in the next decade or so. The two which seem to be more difficult to achieve, one is what he refers to as unity of races and unity of religion. We still have a lot of racism in the world. There's still a lot of backwardness in other countries, third world countries, particularly in South America, in Africa, in many regions of Africa, in some parts of Asia. So part of it deals with racism and how the people of the world can look at each other as members of the same planet and work together in order to reach that harmony between people of the world in order to bring about peace and harmony. But the last one, which is very important, is called what he calls unity of religion. The Baha'i thought on that is that eventually humanity should understand that religions which have come to mankind through ages, they have all come to the same God. Their mission and vision have been essentially the same, which is to bring peace and harmony into the world. But it has been gradual and progressive. And as the new manifestation comes, there's another step toward fulfillment of many of those promises. I should also indicate that in Baha'i writings the reference to this coming world government, which would be democratic, but Baha'i faith envisions, as it is practiced in the Baha'i administration within the Baha'i community itself, that the vision of the Baha'i faith for this local government and national governments and world government of the future is that it has elements of what he calls autocracy and aristocracy and democracy in its form. Democracy in the sense that there has to be global election, like local, national, global election, like the Baha'is do it within their own administrative system. So that's the democratic phase. Aristocracy, which means that some educated but humble and well-informed citizens should be selected in order to oversee a lot of things that happen within communities to maintain peace and order and harmony, and other elements, so that it is not total unbridled freedom, and it's not dictatorship either. So everything is within the structure, in effect, to be able to run the affairs of the humankind harmoniously. Next, I want to share with you a passage from one of the writings of Shoghi Effendi, who was the guardian of the Baha'i faith, who basically was in charge of running the affairs of the Baha'is on a global scale from 1921 until 1957, when he passed away. And he devoted all these 36 years to serving the Baha'i community and elucidating on many of the writings of Baha'u'llah. He says in one of these documents called The Advent of Divine Justice, he indicates that, of course, this was written in 1938, before World War II, and he says the earth is now transformed into an armed camp. The light of religion is dimmed and moral authority disintegrating. The nations of the world have, for the most part, fallen prey to battling ideologies that threaten to disrupt the very foundation of their dearly won political unity. Agitated multitudes in these countries see them with this content, or armed to the teeth, or stampede with fear, and groan beneath the yoke of tribulations engendered by political strife, racial fanaticism, national hatreds, and religious animosities. And of course, we know that all of these things led to World War II. And if you're not careful, a lot of these things still linger in the hearts and minds of many people across the globe, and many nations who are hostile to one another, and that citizens of the world, people who are concerned about the future of humanity, must think about these issues in order to bring about harmony and peace to this troubled world. Baha'i faith also envisions in this global system a combination of a world parliament, the members of which to be elected democratically by people of the world, and in this election process to have some kind of endorsement by the legislature in these countries, and also by the executive of that country, so that in effect when those 2 or 3 or 5 people, depending on the number of inhabitants of that country that represent that nation, to represent the people, to represent the government, to present the parliament of that country. The Universal House of Justice, which is the elected body who runs the affairs of the Baha'is, issue periodically announcements, in effect, to the people of the world, to the government of the world, to nations of the world, as to where we are with regard to this progress toward total peace and harmony, that bring of peace to earth as it is in heaven. In one of these documents, issued in the year 1985, it's called The Promise of World Peace, issued by the Universal House of Justice to the people of the world, reiterates where we are with regard to this progress and this process of the forces of construction and destruction. I will just read for you the highlights from this important document. It said, the great peace towards which people of goodwill throughout the centuries have inclined their hearts is now at long last within the reach of the nations. As the need for peace becomes more urgent, a fundamental contradiction demands a reassessment of the assumptions upon which the commonly held view of mankind's historical predicament is based. The Baha'i faith regards the current world confusion as a natural phase in an organic process leading irresistibly to the unification of the human race. So we believe, out of conviction, that yes, these trials, these forces of construction and destruction continues to work, but we are going toward that ultimate peace and harmony. And when we become aware of it, we become more focused, that this is our goal, this is where we are leading. And we support and help all those forces who work in this direction. No serious attempt to set human affairs aright, to achieve world peace, can ignore religion. Religion is considered very important in Baha'i faith, all religions. All religions that teach peace and harmony. If humanity has come to a point of paralyzing conflict, it must look to itself, to its own negligence, for the source of the misunderstanding and confusion perpetrated in the name of religion. So when we forget the essence of religion, then it brings forward dogmas and superstitions and prejudices and hatred of other groups and other religions, other denominations. So this is still where we are. A lot has been achieved, a lot more needs to be done. Had humanity seen the educators of its collective childhood as agents of one civilizing process, it would have reaped incalculably greater benefits from the cumulative effects of the successive missions. This is on the idea that all religions come from the same source. They have come through time, but the message is essentially one and the same, to bring peace and harmony to the world, but it has been in stages. How tragic is the record of the substitute faiths that the worldly wise of our age have created. The fruits of these doctrines have produced are the social and economic ills that blight every region of our world. Of course, these false religions are referred to in some of the Baha'i writings as the false religions of fascism and communism and Nazism and materialism. And that materialistic ideals have failed to satisfy the needs of mankind calls for an honest acknowledgement that a fresh effort must now be made to find the solutions to the agonizing problems of the planet. No matter how many cars we have, no matter how many houses we have, that does not bring the ultimate real bliss and prosperity to the humankind. We have to have the basic needs satisfied. We have to have to work toward our aspirations with regard to physical means, but that is not the end. When it becomes the end, it brings more hatred than love and harmony to the human race. Banning nuclear weapons, prohibiting the use of poison gases, or outlawing germ warfare will not remove the root causes of war. It's all good for these things to be done, but we have to eliminate the root causes of war, which is the combination of hatred and dogmas and superstitions and hate of another religion or another race, or disparity between the rich and the poor, the extreme disparity between the rich and the poor and all the rest of it, which are the cause of war and animosity. A paralysis of will, rooted in a deep-seated conviction of the inevitable quarrelsome of mankind, has led to the reluctance to entertain this possibility of subordinating national self-interest to the requirements of world order. We are still struggling with our nationalistic ideas. A lot of it brings hate and division and ultimately war, rather than the global aspiration of the whole human race to think of each other as members of the same family, as brothers and sisters living on this small planet. Racism, one of the most painful and persistent evils, is a major barrier to peace. The inordinate disparity between the rich and poor keeps the world in a state of instability. Unbridled nationalism must give way to a wider loyalty to the loving humanity as a whole. I already mentioned something to that effect. The emancipation of women, the achievement of full equality between the sexes, is one of the most important, though less acknowledged, prerequisites of peace. So all of these things that are being listed are among the things which are needed in order to bring about that ultimate peace. Whether it's racial equality, whether it is equality between men and women, and some level of harmony with nature, and some level of equity between rich and poor, all of these are prerequisites to world peace. The abolition of war is not simply a matter of signing treaties and protocols. It is a complex task requiring a new level of commitment to resolving issues not customarily associated with the pursuit of peace. So just ending war does not bring real peace. There are other elements which we have touched upon and we'll discuss even more. The primary challenge in dealing with issues of peace is to raise the context to the level of principle as distinct from pure pragmatism. Well, we say we need peace because it's pragmatic and will reduce our cost, but it's not only that. Our mindset has to change. Our mindset has to become loving and kind and generous, like the way that they explain God and manifestations of God. We are children of the same God, and we have to absorb those attributes. We have to become part of Him to bring peace on earth as it is in heaven. Acceptance of the oneness of mankind is the first fundamental prerequisite for reorganization and administration of the world as one country, the home of humankind. So it has to become part of our mindset that this planet Earth is really like one country and we are all its citizen, and we have to help each other to maintain that peace and harmony among one another. I remember I went to Nigeria to teach the Baha'i faith many years ago. And I went to different villages and I stayed with those villagers. And particularly because I was in that mindset, I felt at home wherever I went. This is how we should lead our lives, all our lives. When we come to the essence of religion, which is all one and the same. The achievement of such ends requires adjustment of national political attributes which now verge on anarchy in the absence of clearly defined laws or universally accepted and enforceable principles. Now, in this document, they say that the time has come when the imperative necessity for the holding of an all-embracing assemblage will be universally realized. So Baha'is are proposing that we have to have a real assemblage of these representatives of the world, more than the United Nations, or built on the principles of the United Nations, and more, to get together to bring peace and harmony. This world gathering must make the cause of peace the object of general consultation and seek by every means in its power to establish a union of the nations of the world. This should be the ultimate goal. We appeal to the leaders of all nations to seize this opportune moment and take irreversible steps to convoke this world meeting. Beyond pragmatic arrangements for security and coexistence lies the crowning goal, the unification of all the peoples of the world in one universal family. This should be the ultimate goal. Initially pragmatic, yes, we'll spend less in arms and there'll be no war, but then ultimately we become members, truly members of the same family. The experience of the Baha'i community may be seen as an example of this enlarging unity. We are happy to offer it as a model for study. I explained briefly what this Baha'i model is in terms of local assemblies, national assemblies, universal justice, consultation, the way of resolving conflicts, and not having conflicts as a model for the world to see and emulate if they see that this thing is a workable model. And Baha'is believe that it has worked in the Baha'i communities. We hold the conviction that all human beings have been created to carry forward an ever-advancing civilization, that the virtues that befit human dignity are trustworthiness, forbearance, mercy, compassion, and loving kindness towards all peoples. We convey to you not only a vision in words, we summon the power of deeds of faith and sacrifice. We convey the anxious plea of our co-religionists everywhere for peace and unity. So this was the document that I shared with you from the Universal House of Justice. And finally, I'll just say a word that another document, 10 years after, called The Prosperity of Humankind, was issued by the Baha'i international community under the auspices of Universal House of Justice. And in this document, they particularly elaborated on the issue of the importance of creating an atmosphere of equity so that the extremes of wealth and poverty would be gone, so that there would be compulsory education, so that no child would be left behind, as it was said in this country some years back. And that methods would be devised so that there'll be enough funds available through taxation and other means, so that the goals of mankind to bring peace and harmony to the world would be achieved. Thank you for your attention.